Welcome to a tutorial on basic texturing techniques for specifically hair. As you can see in showing you now, I've started some of the hair texture so you can see what we are sort of aiming for overall. There will be certain elements of the sculpt that will have longer hair and certain parts that are shorter. So these are my tools. These are metal tools, different angle. That one's to a point and curved and then flat on top. This is my raking tool as well as the raking brush, which gets any excess clay off with baby powder. I have a scraping, scratching tool, a silicone tool for more smooth and rounded indentations for the clay, a brush to brush the powder on top of the sculpture. Now this is the godsend of all tools. It is a small raking tool, larger on one end than the other. So now I'm just using the tool that's flat on top and curved at the bottom. You can find any of these tools on eBay, at sculpting, art events, art shops. They're really good overall and not too expensive to use. So I'm just initially getting marks in. With skin you usually would use something more rounded and softer. The skin is naturally smooth, whereas hair is flowing but yet scratchy looking. So I'm trying to achieve the scratching look right now just by simply putting pressure into the clay and pulling down. This is time consuming, but in order to get the desired look, this is what's required to do. And then I'm just showing you closely the scratch marks that I've just done. Now you will see they're a bit rough. They've got flakes on them. This is what the raking and brushes are for, combined with the baby powder. This flakes off any excess clay that you've scratched and also softens the clay depending on how much pressure you add with your brush or raking brushes. Here you can just see me taking off the excess, then going with a raking brush and just softening out those hairs. When softening out the hair, the scratching technique, it creates more of a fluent look. This is what you need when trying to replicate hair, as hair looks rough but yet also looks smooth and flowing. So hair is quite hard texture to capture when sculpting, as it's got two opposite looking features. So it's about combining a number of techniques to try and achieve that. So just keep going over with this soft brush raking tool. That'll just get off any excess and also soften your clay. The brush I'm using you can get from any hobby store. The raking brush tool is actually an eyelash brush from a cosmetic store. So yeah, the tools are easily accessible and fairly cheap. Now I'm going to go in with one of my more expensive tools, which is a small raking tool. This is for the more fine detailed areas. I'm using the smaller side as this sculpt is small, so it's more appropriate for this particular sculpt to use the smaller side. I'm just applying and pulling, and what this does is it removes clay as well as makes indentations. And as you can see, I'm signalling a round shape. This is me showing you that I am moving a thicker part of the hair that is on the hand and making it flow to one side. This is what happens when you see long hair. As the longer hair grows, the more it'll flick out and flow in different ways. So when you've got shorter hair, it's more scratchy and straight, like I showed earlier, whereas the more longer the hair is, the more flow you will see within the hair. So trying to replicate this with the clay is just building up a number of techniques and making sure you keep the flow and angling and creating the shapes with the raking tool in soft, rounded movements, not short and jagged movements. When there is long hair, there is more refined hairs, sometimes more than others. So here I'm just adding that contrast. Some parts are more blended into the shorter hair, and then some parts more stand out on their own. Usually the hair pieces that are flicking out more than the others. This tool you can purchase online from Neil's Materials, and if I'm correct, it is called Itty Bitty, the tool. It's not cheap, but I've used this on small sculpts, large sculpts for full head masks, and I find it's a godsend. So now I'm just going to show you the technique again on a separate part of the sculpt, which will be the leg. Again, going in that tool that's rounded on the bottom and flat on the top. Reasons for using the rounded bottom one is it's curved. Even though the short hairs look straight and jagged, with it being nature, it will never be perfectly straight. So by using a slightly rounded tool, but that is still sharp, will still give that sharp effect, but not being too concise, as nature is never perfect. So it's imperative to select your tools wisely and analyse the shapes of your tools and how sharp they are and how blunt they are, what they're made out of, to analyse the best, what will give you the best results for what you're trying to get. So again, going in with the small raking tool, the small side again, and simply making those indentations where I want more precise, noticeable hair. It's about going back and two with different tools and building up the layers whilst brushing and removing excess clay in between. If you was to carry on scraping your sculpt without flicking off any of the excess scraped clay, you would end up scraping and pulling the excess clay back into your sculpt, creating quite a mess and clumps all over. So it's nice just to go over with some brushes like this one now, just to get rid of the excess clay, and even sometimes powder, because sometimes you can have too much powder on and it blinds you from what you're actually sculpting onto. I'm just going over anywhere in the sculpt where I feel the excess clay needs to be removed or powder. And I'm using a different type of tool. I find the eyelash comb pulls the clay but doesn't create a flat pull. It keeps the curvature of the indentations made in the clay whilst also smoothing it out and making the clay flow into each other. As you can see here, it's starting to come together more. The hair is flowing more. There's an awful long way to go with this, but like I say, it's all about layering up like I have done on the centre of the chest, which you see when I pan the camera out, and you can see slightly there on the camera.